أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'm here with Dr. Suad Abdul-Khabeer. I consider you one of the rising stars of our community. You've written for our community, you've written for the broader community. You're in touch with the culture, you're in touch with academia. Um, you do so much. But if you had to introduce yourself, what's the first things that you tell people about yourself?
I'm from Brooklyn, New York City, where they paint me as Biggie.
You start there, huh?
That's where I start. I always say the most important thing about me is I'm from Brooklyn.
Mashallah.
And then after that, I tell people I'm Amina's daughter, and I am an artist, a scholar, and an activist.
Mm. And where are you? You're teaching now, right?
Yeah, so I'm a professor. I'm an associate professor in the Department of American Culture at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Oh, okay. I don't know why my mind just always thinks of you in at Princeton or
Well,
in
it's because I
Georgia.
got my PhD was from Princeton, but that was a while
Okay.
ago now.
I'm dating myself. It's amazing how I don't know, you kind of well, I won't put it on you. I kind of put people in moments of time, and it's like you never grow from that. You always be the young person that I knew that was
Right.
very you gave us some good critique as a music group, Late Indeed.
You're
And
right. I mean, well, I still look good, so I mean, I'm not surprised that
I know, you look like you just graduated from Princeton. But no, we wanted to, tap into you and tap into your wisdom, into your insight, into your scholarship, just to think about what comes next. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of stuff on social media, there's a lot of emails, there's a lot of webinars happening about this election and what's at stake, and there's a lot of uh, I think people trying to convince, I won't say convert, but sometimes it feels like people are trying to convert you to this camp or that camp. But man, I wanted to just kind of think about what comes after the election and make sure that the community is not going to just be pointing fingers at one another and dividing and not really going anywhere. So we wanted your thoughts on that. And my first question to you is, am I even thinking about this tension in the wrong way? Do you see this tension that's happening in our community surrounding this election as a problem, as it's proof that we have issues, unresolved issues, or do you see it as a healthy point that we can have disagreements and a healthy community does have disagreements? How do you look at this?
Well, thank you for the invitation to sort of share, what I'm able to share, right, around these questions. It's reminding me actually of in 2016, Sappo Square, a digital media collective, an organization that I was a co-founder of and used to lead, had a "Where Do We Go From Here" series, right after the first Trump election, right? Because it's like, okay, well, what, like, what do we do now, right? And we had a series of folks come on to kind of help us think through, like, what do we do from here? So I really appreciate that. I think we do need to always be thinking, kind of like we have to be present, but also, forward thinking. Because, what's at stake is the same thing that's always been at stake, our freedom and liberation. Like that's been at stake since 1619, 1517, 1965, 2024. So that's always been at stake. And so I think, it's important to then to have a long view, and then to also and have a long view of the past and have a long view of the future, right? Because we were not meant to survive, and we particularly in terms of Black people were not meant to survive. But here, look at but we're here, right? Like miracles walking. So I think it's important to sort of have that kind of context. So no, I don't think disagreement is a problem. And I forget who I heard this from. I don't know if it was maybe it was Dr. Cornel West. But like you want unity, not uniformity, right?
Mhm.
It's like the moon wars. People get all upset. I'm like, I love it because that means you're actually engaged in your tradition. If you care enough about whether or not you should sight them with your eye or use scientific calculations, that means that you actually care about what your tradition is, what it's doing, what it's not doing. So I think that it's a good that people disagree. I mean, distinction and difference is just part of the human experience. You're not going to get away from that, as is connectivity and relation, right? So it's like, so we're going to have things that we differ, points in which we're kind of whatever, but there's always going to be this relationality, and this way we connect to it as well, right? So I think that's good. I think it's good to have that. It means people care, they're paying attention, they're not just kind of on autopilot. I think that's a really good thing that that's happening. I think for me, the what can be problematic may be the terms of debate. So not debating.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
So I feel like when it comes to in the last maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 years, maybe decade. I don't know if it's been that long, right? My sort of observation of political discourse within Muslims in the United States, broadly speaking, has really kind of whittled down to a very narrow set of quote unquote moral concerns, right? Mm-hmm. And so people want to debate whether or not you should support LGBTQ communities or not. Like, this is a hot button topic. It's like you live in check to check. The police is killing your people. You don't have clean water, right? There's an environmental collapse, but that is the term of the debate. So that's what I mean, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not that this particular issue may or may not be important in a broader sense, but on the level of like, am I going to eat tomorrow? It's not really, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a way in which through, they call it in the Black community, they call it the Black Miss Leadership class, and
the Black Miss Leadership?
Leadership class, yes, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're people who are sort of self-appointed or anointed leaders in a community, but really are not really guiding the community. They're misleading people. So likewise, I think we have a similar phenomenon in the Muslim community, right? So we have a sort of a series of kind of a self-appointed or appointed, right? People who sort of see themselves as leaders in a particular way, but are really sort of pushing people in one way. And I think those terms of debate are very narrow. So that's what, if there's a problem, I think that would be it. So not people disagree, not people have strong opinions, but that there's the hierarchy of concerns is very small, oftentimes, mm-hmm. like, as opposed to as expansive as our lives and our worlds are.
There's two things you said I want to follow up on. One, kind of jokingly, when you said Moon Wars, I was really thinking of a movie. I was trying to and until later on, you said it was about Ramadan. Is that how it's referred to now, the Moon Wars?
I've seen on social media. I've seen people refer to it as the Moon Wars. So they're like, here we go again,
Okay. I learned something today. Thank you very much. But you also talked about the long game, and you said that what's at stake has always been at stake. And so as people talk about like this election is one of the most important elections and this is different than all others, I hear you saying yes, and that's kind of always the situation, and it's more about being aware of that and thinking on a longer timeline than just this one. Can you help me sort through that a little bit, what you meant?
So I think, I'm not a historian, right, like officially or anything like that. So I don't want to speak too out of turn, in so much as what I mean is that like this whole thing, this is the worst that's ever happened. I'm like, no, we were slaves. This is not the worst that's ever happened. I'm sorry. Like, it's just not, okay? Like, it literally is not. That said, it is pretty bad. It's not like it's not bad, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But when you have a long perspective, it's like, okay, wait a minute now. All right, okay. All right, this is crazy, or this thing is happening. Like, there's a genocide. We're literally watching people being killed like every day, burned alive. I mean, that is insane, mm-hmm. right? And we have lived through, the collective we in a broad sense, have lived through insanity before, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, all right, so when you have that, I think it allows you to maybe operate not out of fear, because I think that's the thing. When you operate out of fear and desperation, and to wax a little bit like spiritual, right? It's like, it's like that verse in the Quran that I don't remember right now, but it's like, well, Allah says, Shaitan, like, that's how Shaitan works, right? To get you to feel, to fear, desperation, or deprivation, right? Like this is what Shaitan promises you, right? But Allah promises you, right, abundance, right? So like scarcity mindsets, fear, desperation. It's not that it's not scary. It's not that it's not critical, but I do think if we can have a longer view, it can help us kind of like adjust the nervous system so we can make plans and we can make things that hopefully, God willing, will sort of get us to a better place. Right. So that's what I mean in terms of that. Right. So even in terms of like this current election and, you know, Trump or Kamala, and then you have people who are like, I'm not voting for her because she's genocide Kamala, and I'm not voting for him because he's crazy. I don't know what, you know what I mean, type of thing, whatever. Or we need to support these people because we don't do this. It's like, well, let's slow down, right? And let's maybe think about ways we can respond in multiple different kinds of ways, right? Electoral politics, for example, is not the only form of political action that exists, right? If you live in a particular state, right, you may make different types of choices, right, based on the actual conditions within which you are actually operating. I was listening to this conversation between Mark Lamont Hill and Professor Butch Ware, right, who's running for the Green Party. And they were making the claim that people say, well, you vote third party, you're throwing your vote away. And they're kind of like, well, no, if you're in a state that's solidly red or blue, if you vote those colors, then you're throwing your vote away because it doesn't really matter. Whereas if you vote a different way, it actually has a personal impact. So that was the argument they're making. I thought was intriguing, right? Because the idea here is not about that, but it's about, well, what is my local condition, right? And what move can I make, right, to affect that, right? Because, and in this case in particular, the move would be around the idea that, a two-party system is a problem anyway, right? And so we need to, part of the problem is we don't have enough options. So how do you create more options, for example? So one strategy, right, could be to do something like that. So it's not about, it's not even about, it's about this other thing, right? It's like this long view, right? Because if we're uncertain how long this empire is going to last, right? We're not really certain how long all this stuff is going to be here. But as long as it's here, right, if we're thinking about it, okay, well then maybe this is something we want to do to make things better. Maybe an option to make things better in the long run is to open up the political field so there are many more options for voting citizens in this country, right, to choose from, for example, right?
Yeah, I mean, you say that, but it sounds easier said than done, right? Like
isn't everything?
Yeah, that's true. So I know this may, I might catch you off guard with this, but how do we get there? Because I feel like, and this is going to lead into one of the questions. I'm going to try to tie this into one of the questions that I wanted. Some people say that the Muslim community is just politically immature. Like voting, getting out to vote is like this was actually said in a setting. Getting out to vote is like kindergarten level of politics. We have to educate ourselves and become a little bit more astute, a little bit more savvy, and we just wait, in general as a community, not individually, but as a community, we wait every 4 years. And then it's always like the sky is falling, we got to do this or that. How do you ever introduce a third party? Because, and I'll say this, even if we were to have an ideal Muslim general supported candidate, right? And so I'm saying maybe they're not even Muslim. Maybe they're just like so value based and saying and doing everything the Muslim community is aligned with. And they're running. But then the propaganda, and that's what I'll call it, I'll name it. The propaganda is like, but this is at stake. It's too big. We can't really afford, don't throw your vote away. It's going to be one of these two people. You gotta like, how do you ever get out of that and start,
Yeah. I mean, you gotta stay in your square, right?
Stay in
So
your square? Okay.
yeah, it's just like so.
Not
Couple
the Sappo Square.
No, not the Sappo Square, no, just
Okay.
on your square. um, but okay, so this question of political immaturity, I think, it's an interesting one, and it really depends on the metrics that you're using.
Mm,
In terms of the like corrupt way in which the political system functions, in which the way in which you actually can have a measurable impact is through lobbying and funding, the Muslim community is not immature, the Muslim community is poor. Okay,
mm,
right, and potentially ethical because they're like we don't want to buy power, right? But generally speaking, the Muslim community in the United States, and I think Khalid Beydoun, the professor, wrote an article about this. Like the majority of Muslims are poor working class. So just like you could have a whole like the woman's you have all these people voting who want to have abortion, right? For something, but they don't have as much money as the one guy who what was which justice was going to his house and he has like the Civil War monument whatever like I
oh,
forget the
wow.
guy, right? But the point is there's a major, you know what I mean? So Muslims are poor. I have a poem. Muslims are poor and colored. Like this is the reality, right? So I don't think it's the one. I don't think that it's fair to judge a community's ability to be politically astute in a system that is run right through right primarily financial contribution, right, and that type of way.
Mhm.
I also don't think that it's. I think that we have to be honest also about whether or not that is actually something we should be astute on, right? In terms of the kind of machinations of how this functions, as opposed to imagining and developing something else, right? Through the things we have, our schools, whatever. But you know what I mean. But there are other possibilities, right? It doesn't have to be like this. So I don't really accept or reject this idea of political immaturity because I think it's
Mhm.
about the frame that you're putting this in, right? So
And the metrics.
right, and it's like, of course, yeah, every 4 years, but this is true about all. Like the majority of Americans don't vote, right? Every community, every 4 years, and it's like I went to a forum they had about it was called the Muslim Vote Fest. It was here in Detroit, and I went because I wanted to hear about local candidates, and one of the judge candidates, I don't remember her name, but she was saying, you know, this idea of voting down ballot, like so just not the top of the ticket. And she was like, yeah, she was saying someone told her once that the people on the top of the ticket rule the world. She's like, but like the judges rule your world, right? And so
Mm,
so this idea of again, just I think having a broader notion of what politics is and what it looks like, right? So yeah, and I think that is a criticism, right? This every 4 years thing is not particular to Muslims.
mhm.
It's a criticism that I think is made to the American kind of like people in general, the U.S. American people in general, right? Is that it's just every 4 years you get whatever you hear something and now you want to get
Yeah.
involved. And it's also, I don't think, a fair criticism because most Americans are poor working class. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's like it's not fair to sort of beat up people who have limited time, limited resources because they're not doing something that people who actually make their lives hard are able to do. Like let's be honest here. So.
So I want to get into this organizing piece and the power piece. You mentioned a point as far as, you know, and I really I feel you there as far as we have to be careful of how we critique our community when it's in this system, and not just our community, maybe, marginalized communities who are trying to achieve some type of political influence and political power, that this system is highly influenced by money. And whether it's a senator, a congressman, the president of the United States, judges, there's a lot of money going back and forth where people sometimes feel stuck. I'm not justifying it, but that's, they got to do it, or they feel like they have to do it. So how do you, when we say in the one organizing class that I took, okay, maybe one out of the three organizing classes that I took, they said, power is from organizing people or organizing money, right? Or both, So if you don't have the money, you got to organize your people, whether it's a boycott, we're not going to do this, we're going to do that, or you have a few people that have a lot of money, or a lot of people that decide to put their money together and put it here and put it there and support the people that you want. What type of, how do we get there when, like you're right, unity is not uniformity. This type of disagreement is healthy. So do you have any from, examples or from your experience, thoughts as far as how we get from here with some type of unity, knowing that we're not going to all be the same, disagreements are healthy, but we still got to organize our community and we have to organize our money to achieve some type of power in this system?
So,
Was that too fluffy or was it clear?
no, I'm just thinking of how to answer that question.
Take your time.
So I want to, for me, I often go back to kind of the Black radical tradition, and I go back to Black movements, Black organizing in the United States, particularly like in the 60s and the 70s, right? And things like the Black Panther Party or the Black Liberation Army, Republic of Africa, the SNCC, CORE, like these different groups, right? And, I think the thing that comes to me from these groups is that, so one, organizing people requires um, requires people to be in community and not just speaking, like this type of thing. It requires political education, right? Which is a kind of study that has to happen that people were doing and would do, even in your working class. There's a particular kind of study that happens and that has to happen, right? In order to sort of, because on one level, there's a kind of study where people are aware of what's happening to them because you live it, right? Like you live it. But then there's a way in which you also need sort of to also inform what you see, right? Because you can see something, right? It's like it's like a soldier in war, right? Like, well, those are my enemies. Well, are they really? You know what I mean? Yeah, they're shooting at me. I'm shooting at them. But like, there's some more information here that might me think about. Well, why are we doing that? You know what I'm saying? So like, because we're all experts of our own experience, right? But that's not sufficient, right? We also need to have context and history, right? So I think how we get there.
Whoa. Okay, wait a minute. I gotta stop you there. Don't
But,
don't lose your train of thought.
okay.
But in that statement that you just said, I feel like is something in the crux of what we're dealing with. You said we are all experts of our own experience. And maybe sometimes people feel like they're losing their voice when people are trying to tell them what's important, or this is what we need, or this is what's important for the community. I'm the expert of my experience. But then you said, but there's also a layer of context and wisdom, and who's the one to shape that, to give that? You said we have to be in the community. So is that what we're missing to who's the one that can tell us, okay, I'm not taking away your experience in Detroit, in I don't know, Brooklyn, but I need you to understand this context. I need I feel like there's something there for me that's like,
Right. So it's not so much who's going to tell you. It's more like we are going to, like, everybody's going to come. So we're all experts of our own experience, right? Because we live it. But like I was saying, but that's not sufficient, right? Because you can be, because like, for example, I'm looking at you right now and my experience of what I see, I don't see what's behind me, right? I can't see behind me. But that's also in my experience. You know what I mean? But someone else might see it and be like, hey, yo, this thing is behind you. You know what I'm saying? Just generally speaking, right? There's a sense in which, yeah, we know we experience, but we are not God, right? We don't know everything, right? And so it's about, well, what is my experience? What is your experience? How do we bring these together? How do we sort of, and then because of that, the different different things that we experience, things that we know, we broaden our understandings, right? I think this thing about, because I don't think it doesn't really work. Well, it's not revolutionary, I guess, to have people just telling you stuff. It's really about a collective understanding that grows out of collective sharing, right? Understanding, study, that type of thing, right? Like this is the ideal. Now that's hard. It's hard. You know what I mean? It's a hard work, right? Because I think the other thing about the Muslim community, and honestly, I was thinking to myself, I don't even know if I think Muslim is an effective political category. Why am I having a conversation with Josh today about this? You know what I mean? Because do I have more in common with, I don't know, some Indian American doctor in Orland Park, like Chicago, who, or with like the Black single mom, in Detroit, right? Like politically speaking, in terms of the types of concerns and needs that I want to have met that I think are important, just because he's Muslim and she's not. You know what I mean? I'm not so certain. And what that made me think of, right, and this question of that too, is about organizing. It may not be organizing the Muslim community. It may be organizing with the Muslims who share your political objectives. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, so for example, my criticism is y'all want to be mad about trans people. And I'm like, the same people who made all these anti-trans laws, the same people who made all the anti-Sharia laws. So if you wanna mess with them folks, that's your business. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? I'm gonna find the folks, Muslim and non-Muslim, who are like, let's have universal base income. Let's have universal. That's what I'm gonna be with, right? And I'm doing that as a Muslim, in the same way you may do the other part as a Muslim. But you and I might pray together, but we're not struggling together really. And that just might be what it is.
Come on now. All right, we gotta take another pause. We gotta take a commercial break. So wait a minute, you can't roll over that so quickly. You said, man, that's gonna be on a t-shirt. We might pray together, but we're not necessarily struggling together. And but wouldn't the response be, but our Muslimness comes first, after some might not even say that it's after humanity, like because the sky and the stars and the trees are Muslim too. I don't know, but let's just say for the sake of argument, they're like, no, we're Muslim first, and then you're Black, or you're Muslim first, and then you're a single mom. You're Muslim first, and then what?
But that also presumes that we agree on what Muslim means, and Muslims have never agreed. I mean, I always say this: the only thing Muslims really agree on is La ilaha illallah, not even Muhammad Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah. And at that point, it's all up for grabs. So I just kind of feel like, and that's true historically. This is not something that's like, particular to the 21st century North America. You know what I mean? That's true historically. So I think, Muslim first presumes a particular kind of uniformity under what Muslim is. And I think we just can't presume that because it's not true. I think we can try to persuade people. We can sort of build arguments based on tradition, based on things to persuade people to see Muslim in a particular way, right? But it doesn't mean it will happen, and it doesn't mean there's not going to be multiple variations of that. And I think that you just have to get comfortable with that. It's like, okay, it is what it is. Just like basically all my skin folk ain't my kinfolk, right? Like it's like, it is what it is, And so I think for me, I think what's important, or what I would hope to see, or I think people would take away, is like first kind of really doing a really deep assessment of what are the most important things, right? In your life, in your reality. Like what really are the most important things? What is really a threat and what isn't? how, because there are very powerful forces in the government, in the media, right, that really shape, like even even some of the they call it, in the academics they call it moral panic, like the Asian scare, the yellow scare, like these moral panic. There's no like what I mean? There's nothing really real here. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like lynching, right? Ida B. Wells, when she wrote about lynching, what would they say? All these black men are running after these white women. Absolutely false.
Hmm.
But how many black men and women and children were hanging from trees because of that panic? Right? So it's like, so really having a kind of like, really sitting with ourselves individually, in our families, in our communities, to really make an assessment. Like what's really threat, you know? Because as far as like, like the planet, and I'm not even like super environmental. I should be, I try to recycle whatever, but it's like the earth, man. Like, you know what I mean? It's like we're not gonna have water. You know what I mean? So there's a way in which it's like, okay, wait a minute, what's really important, and then organizing ourselves around protecting those things and advancing those things, right? And things that might be important but are not as critical have a place. I'm not saying they don't have a place, but like our efforts around building power and building community, I think really should be centered on the things that are most really fundamental, as opposed to things that are quite frankly debatable, even in
Yeah.
Muslim tradition. You know what I mean? So.
You you've hit me kind of hard here. I'm having a hard time gathering my thoughts. I what okay. So I'm gonna try to phrase this for you. I'm trying to pull together a few things that you said. One, I really don't want to move past that too much
Mhm.
because I feel in my limited experience, what you just said is is maybe the seed of healing, reconciliation, some type of figuring it out, the type of unity that we need to move forward. When you say we have to be, the words you said was we have to be okay with that, right? We have to be okay with I am Muslim, and that is not debatable. So even if you want to say, what kind of Muslim are you? If you vote this, real Muslims don't. Okay, I'm. You have the right to say that, but my Muslimness is not up for debate. And this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm struggling on. This is what's important to me. And as a community, we have to get comfortable with that. That's kind of what I was hearing you say. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot there because that comfort, um, that I don't see it happen. I know it's important. I don't know how we would get to just being comfortable with people doing that. But you said something earlier that I think might help me understand it. When you said it's not about one person, um, telling you about this is the context or whatever. Because I have a blind spot. I can't see behind me, and I need people around me to help me see my blind spots. And you said it's about bringing this person in and this person in, and kind of collectively figuring out that maybe communal wisdom. I wanted to ask you, have you seen any efforts? I mean, I know you and I haven't been in every circle in America or around the world, but have you experienced that? Something that you can point at and say that was a really healthy
Hmm.
pulling people in within the community?
Well, I always like to cite this. Okay, so I always like to cite my mother, right?
All right, all right. Bismillah.
Right. But and like and the women that she called them activist sisters, right? That she when she became Muslim and then they worked with, and I think that they all came to Islam from a sort of movement background, and so they brought that with them into Islam. And for them, it was kind of like, okay, well, what are the needs that we have? So, for example, many of them were mothers, right? And so it's like, well, our kids need schools, right? And so, so they so they come together, they pool their resources, and then they say, okay, let's do this, like, they had it was called Islamic Concepts East, and it was like a sounds like almost like a Sunday school type of program that they developed. You know, they had people like my mother was a teacher, other people were teachers, right? They had a curriculum, they had all this stuff. Like I literally have a folder and it's just literally like how they organize this, right? And they some of them had educational backgrounds, some of them came from like one person was like a bookkeeper, you know, this type of thing. And they did different things. So they kind of sort of come together, right, and do that. Now, what's here? So there's a shared vision, right? And
Mhm.
that shared vision, I think, came kind of, and that shared vision came from how they were already oriented, right? And from shared experiences as well. And I think, and then you organize around that. Now, I, what I want to say about that, I think, is that getting to that place is not easy work. And I'm not trying to make it seem like this is like, oh, we're just whatever. No, but like life isn't easy. I mean, like this is the work of living, right? So it's not
Mhm.
that it's going to be easy. Like, you know, one of the things about, you know, something like a Muslim community is really diverse, right? In terms of class status, gender, race and ethnicity, nationality, immigration status, right?
Mhm.
Like language, right? I mean, it's very, very diverse. And so in order to come even to a shared vision, there has to be an acknowledgement of that diversity, right? And a creation of a like level playing field. A real investment in the idea that each person who comes to this table to figure something out is as valuable and as important as the other one.
Okay, so that's what you mean by creating some type of, what did you say before you said a level playing field?
Level playing field, because I think because part of what happens is that even though we all like Islam is justice and equality, we don't live like that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I know two words Arabic, all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like, and then you know what I mean? No, 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 no. We're not talking about this. Is not Arabic class. This is, you know, this is like, how are we going to make sure that for example, our kids have a proper education? Your two
Mhm.
words Arabic don't make you more valuable than me, who I'm a mother of five. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
you have a value. I have a value. And then we get, so, you know, so I think part of what happens too is when you have these difficulties, or part of what makes it difficult is that there isn't a real sincere, not sincere, I don't want to use that word. There isn't just an honest acknowledgement of our biases
Mhm.
and the privileges and how people get privileged and not, right? And so I think in order to come to a shared vision, you have to, one, be able to really respect that the person that you're talking to has something of value to share. Then you have to be willing to make compromise, right?
Mhm.
Like, these are our priorities right now. Maybe in 5 years, in 10 years, it'll shift when we get to this particular thing or whatever. You know, and those are more, I guess, like strategic things. But generally speaking, I think it's about, for me, it's like taking a stock for yourself, right? Like, who am I? Where do I live? What is happening? What are the things that are really important to me? Who's in my community? You know, how can we do? I respect them. I may not agree all the time, but I'm gonna hear them out. Can we do this? And if we can't, you know, Mashi, you know, like we can't do that. Maybe I'll see you at Juma, but we're not gonna
Mhm.
do that. And that's cool too. You know what I mean? Like, because yeah, I don't know. I just don't, I think that it's difficult, it's hard, right? But
Well, you have a, uh, I would argue you have a healthy outlook on the diversity. Um, but how does somebody with your outlook beautifully engage the person that's really trying to call you out, that's throwing your name under the bus, that is trying to cancel you because of, you voted this way, you went to this meeting, whatever you did.
so I don't so so okay, so it's funny because part of me is here for all the smoke because I'm from Brooklyn, right? So part is like we could do that if you want, right? Right. But also part of me is like, it just, I think actually for me, I don't have a general answer to that question. It depends on the context. Like if there's someone or some people or some groups in which I really think that like investing time and energy and getting up to the same page is worth it and useful, then I'm gonna do that. But again, it's an assessment, right? I'm like, that's cool. You can think what you want to think. I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So like for me, like that's a real thing. Like I don't like, and it's funny. And friends of mine, I'm like, there's certain people, certain things. I'm not doing that with you. If you want to talk to those people and try to get them, you can do that, and I support you in that. I'm not the person to do that, right? So it's an assessment in a way, right? In terms of like where I'm going to invest it. I do think that there is I've been paying attention, right, to this in this current election cycle, and if you vote for Kamala, I'm like, I don't think that's helpful, and I actually don't think it's true. Like I don't think people are, kind of choosing, right? I don't think people are choosing to vote for Kamala Harris because they don't care about Palestinians, for example. Like I just don't think that's accurate. I think they are trying to sort of make the best choice in a horrible condition, and I think we have to be honest about that. I don't think demonizing anyone is actually really helpful. Now, someone voting for Trump, yeah, probably does not care about Palestinians. Say that. No,
Okay, I'm like,
no, and the reason why I'm joking, but also I say that in so much as that what we know about the Trump presidency, like a Muslim ban, things like that. That's what I mean in that sense. I mean, I don't mean like literally, but I mean in that sense, in the sense that like there's a kind of and I'm not saying to vote for Kamala. Let me be very clear about that, right? But what I'm saying is that like I'm making a joke, but I'm also making a point, right, around a particular kind of track record, right, for this one particular candidate that's really kind of there's less wiggle room of any sort, I would argue, than anything else, right? So that's kind of the joke I'm making. But ultimately, even with Trump supporters, I don't think it's good to I don't think demonizing people is actually helpful, right? I think what's more helpful is trying to understand, right, particularly for people who want to do mass organizing, right? Or what is motivating this, right? What is motivating someone to see this in a particular kind of way? And is there a way that we can actually give them a counter, you know? And if they're and if they're and how to do that, and if there's not, then how to like make your peace with that,
yeah,
and invest in, you know, those who you don't have to fight so hard, you know, to sort of
yeah,
like build with. Like, why waste all your time, trying to get the Trumps. It's like you could spend all your time trying to get the Trump supporter or the liberal or the neoliberal Kamala supporter to do something. Or you could go to like the South Bronx, right? And like organize 100, I don't know, Dominicans to do something. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, you know what I'm saying? So like you could do that, but there, I guess for me, there are always other options. And I think
yeah,
we just need to be aware of the fact that like we as kind of people who don't have a lot of power are often fed a frame and a vision and the possibilities. And the way that we have survived, and let me make this smaller, I'm gonna speak as a Black person. The way that we have survived, we've always had an imagination bigger than that was given to us. That's the only way we've survived. And so I think using that as an example is like, we have to think bigger all the time, right? Because what we're going to receive is going to be small. You can only do this. You only have these choices. And it's like, Allah is my God, not you. What you mean? You know what I'm saying? And it's not that it's not going to be hard. Not that you're going to have, like, what you call it, like obstacles. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that, but you can think bigger than that. So like, just think bigger than that,
I have I have a few comments about what you said thus far, and then I'm going to move into my last question, which is going to be very easy for you. Um, I like what you said. It for me personally, it always feels comfortable when I hear people. I don't know. I don't even know if I want to call it demonized. It's not like they're demonizing, but it's like they're doing something to them when they talk about. Because I do know some Muslims who are going to vote for Trump, right? I do know some Muslims who are going to vote for Trump, and whatever my opinions are on it, I know them to be good people, like you said. Them voting for Trump doesn't mean ABC. Now, somebody else would say, "How in the world could they do that? Don't they know this about this person? He's a criminal, he's convicted. Why would they vote for somebody like that?" And I'm okay with those questions if you sincerely want the answers, right? If you want to sincerely get to know your Muslim brother, your Muslim sister, or fellow neighbor or whatever, like why, how can you do this? Then I think they would want to tell you. They would want to express themselves to you. But I don't want to talk about them as if they're, I don't know. In a way, it starts making me not want to be around them. It makes me um, not even care for them.
Mm.
It starts to make me um, not want to help them. I think it can even lead towards if something bad happens to them, you're like, well, that's what they get. You know, like that was one of my concerns. Like after the election, if somebody didn't vote the way that we thought they should vote, and then something happens that we knew would happen, and it happens to them, is our immediate reaction, well, that's what they get. You know, that's how they voted. That's, you know, the band or whatever's coming. Um, so yeah, when you were talking, it was making me think about that, about being mindful of demonizing people. Um, but you know, sometimes you got to call stuff out. But I think there's some wisdom and context to it. I like how you said you always got to assess. You didn't really have any like, this is what you do. You said to almost every question I said, you were like, well, you have to assess the situation. You got to, you know, it's not always this, it's not always that, and I appreciated that. Um, and I really appreciated how you said, you know, it the diversity in our community has to be acknowledged first, right? Before we try to do some collective vision, like, hey, this is the direction we need to go. It's like, hey, first, do you know that within, you know, 5 mile radius of here, we got these type of Muslims and these types of, and they're all Muslim and they're all part of our community. Do you know about that diversity? How can we kind of create a table that gives a seat to as many people as possible? So I really liked what you brought there too. And I really want to thank you for making time for me and making time for Mana and for this series. But in our last moments together, well, you can sum up whatever you want, but I want you to tell us more about Sappo Square, and I want you to tell us a little bit more because you dropped it a few times about your children and how they're doing, and just as a mother, how you feeling?
No, no, no. I'm not a mother of 5 kids. I was just saying that as an example.
Oh man, I was like, I didn't know. I didn't know. Well, I'm glad we clarified that. There might have been some listeners like, really, Suad, when did that happen? Okay. All right. So we'll just stick with Sapelo Square then.
Hilarious. So Sapelo, I like in 20, I am no longer affiliated with Sapelo, right?
Okay.
So in 2022, I'm really happy we had got some funding and transitioned into the first executive director, Latasha Rousseau, who's been directing Sapelo
Yeah.
that time. Sapelo is a really important resource, right? I think.
It was like it was your baby.
Yes, yes. So it was an idea that I germinated along with some other folks, right?
Okay.
Um, uh, like a couple times before we really got started in 2015. And really sort of today is, like I said, this digital media and education collective that really focus on, who Black Muslims are, and why that matters, right? And thinks about sort of telling the stories of Black Muslims in the United States, and also analyzing that and kind of trying to understanding what that history means and what we can learn from it and what the significance of that is to the Black community in the US, Muslims in the US, the global world, right? Because, as you know, if you are Black and Muslim, you sit at this really sort of important intersection, right?
Mhm.
Of the African diaspora, right? Of the global Muslim community, right? And then as people who live in the United States, right, as this kind of imperial power, right, that you have a relationship to, a complicated relationship to. So there's a lot to learn from that, a lot to be understood still, right, and a lot that can kind of grow out of that. So Sappo, as an online resource works, through articles and online forums and series, right, and journalism, right, to kind of center and tell those types of stories, right. And I mean, it's a really important resource that's always looking for support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's people who want to write for it, people who want to join the squad, people who want to donate, right? Because to date, it's still primarily volunteer, and it's gonna be 10 years next year,
Wow.
and it's still sort of one of its kind. And so I think it's a really, really important effort, and a place where we've had this. Like I remember I forget which election cycle it was, but I know there was a series on reflecting on Malcolm's ballot or the bullet, right, and having different people from the community kind of reflect on that at that particular junction, right. And so to have a forum and a platform in which you can kind of talk about these things and engage in these things, because really important. Because one of the things that I think, and I think I've said this throughout the conversation, but a really key thing, right, that needs to happen in all types of communities is education, right? Is education around who your people are, what is their story, right? What is happening around you? It's very hard to get that information because between just the challenges of living, right? And also all of the misleadership and misinformation that's literally being pushed on us, from, bots on social media to lying politicians, right? So I mean, like it is actually hard, right? I think to get good information, but
Yeah.
good information is so important because when you have good information, like when you know better, you can do better, right? And so like Sapelo is a place like that to help you know better so you can do better, right? And so I think that it's just so critical. And if there's anything I said that's of any value or any part, is that part. It's like study. This is what I always say about the activist sisters. When I look at their archive, I think it was Kwame Ture who said this: organize, organize, organize. Right? This is kind of thing. And the other thing is study, 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 because the archive is full of books and information, right? Because you cannot effectively organize if you don't study, right? You know what I mean? You just can't do that. So I think dedicating ourselves as individuals and our families and our communities to really kind of just getting back to studying, I think.
Mm.
And that's long. It's not gonna happen overnight. It's not quick, it's not fast, it's not cute. And it's not a TikTok video either. It's like actual, like engaged study with people in real time. We are
Mm-hmm.
sharing the same air. You know what I mean? Like that also builds relationships. It builds community. And so then we can pray together and struggle together. You know what I'm
Hey,
saying?
hey,
I think
full
that's what we
circle.
want. I think we want
Full
that.
circle. Yeah, we want to pray together and struggle together, and then pray that we don't have to struggle, or pray that our struggle enters us into Jannah. Thank you so much. This was a treat. Um, uh, any last thing, any projects you got coming up that you want the people to know about?
Um, do I have Yes, I do. I am. So they should just what should they do? Just follow me. Actually, follow me on Instagram. My
Okay.
Instagram is Dr. Docta Suad Suad, because I have some artwork. I have a poetry book. I have some things that will be coming out in the next couple of months. So I want people to check that out. So
All right. Doctor with just the Docta.
Doctor, because I'm from Brooklyn, Doctor.
Dr.
So,
Suad. I like it.
all
And
right.
you dropped the title of one of your poems in this interview. You said it was called
Oh yeah, Muslims are poor and colored.
yeah, yeah, yeah. MashaAllah. May Allah bless you. May Allah bless you and reward you for all the work that you've been doing in the community. Everybody, this was Dr. Suad. Follow her on Instagram and make dua for her that as a community, after this election, we learn how to pray together and struggle together. And if we don't, it's okay. We're
Yes.
still Muslim and we're still going to be working for Allah's cause, fi sabilillah. Yeah, I took a lot away from this conversation, and I thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Alaikum.
The time has come for African American Muslims to come together to drive action. We realize that one person alone cannot find answers to the unique needs of the Black community. But when we put it in the hands of our community, it can pave the way for progress and address our issues. At MANA, we are committed to working together to make America a country where justice, equality, and righteousness reign, and the legacy of Islam lives on. We are driven by a passion to serve and the desire to strengthen African American Muslim communities. Let's come together and raise our collective voice to address our community's issues. This is the perfect time to join the MANA Network to address issues that seek solutions. We joined with other organizations in a historic project to assess the state of the African American Muslim community. Go to manajustice.org to learn about the results and to join the MANA Network.